I'm Richard Min, and I am here with
Oscar.
And he is one of my good friends. And how are you doing, Oscar?
I'm doing very good, and I'm so happy to see you again after such a long time back in Japan.
Yeah, back in Japan, I went to a tech conference, and you were there, and we got along great.
That was right. Yeah.
How do you do, and what about yourself in terms of background? And,
I see.
And what are you doing in the future, and what are you doing in the present?
I see. I guess my background goes back. Well, I'm actually originally from Mexico. So yeah, I was born in Mexico. I started, I guess like everybody else, studying computer science.
Okay.
And I mean, not everybody else, but people who are interested about building companies. Sometimes I think it's either the business side or the technical side. I started from the technical side by doing websites back in the day. I'm talking about 93. I started learning how to code.
Man. How old are you starting to code?
About 14 years old.
Oh man.
Like 14 years old. I was actually early on very interested about websites. I think because of my group of friends. My group of friends were seniors at the school where I were, and they were computer scientists. I mean, they were starting to study computer science. So I think that they really sort of pushed me into that. But my original interest comes from video games. I was actually a huge fan of video games when I was young, and I was very curious about how to make games.
Yeah.
And eventually, I think people started telling me, at school and some other people like, oh, you need to learn how to code if you want to do games.
Interesting.
So I think that was the start.
What was your favorite game back then?
Back in the day, I think it was like any Nintendo game, like Super Mario Brothers 3, Super Mario Bros. 3. I think that was the one that I was going crazy. Super Mario Bros. 2 was actually pretty good for me, even though it has a crazy story.
Yeah.
But that one also, it was like mind-blowing for me. And I really wanted to learn what was behind, like what was back, and how to make it. So I started my first company kind of like an accident.
Accident, what happened?
So I was still at high school and about to join university for computer science, and I realized that back in Mexico and back in Latin America, we didn't have a lot of information about video games, like video game news and video game content online. There were no websites doing it in Spanish. There were no communities putting together gamers together. So kind of as a hobby in school, we started putting together an online forum, a group of friends of mine for gamers.
Yeah.
And also we started putting together a small website that we were just, checking news in English and translating the news in Spanish. And this is all manual, right? Like pre-CMS era, and just updating HTML, Java applets and stuff like that. Putting news in Spanish.
Way back.
Yeah. But that community actually started as a kind of like a hobby, but it started to become very big. And at some point, we had like 50,000 people there, checking the website and reading the news and always asking us, oh, let's keep growing it and how can we help and so on. And eventually, I met this guy who was a game distributor. He was selling PC games back in the day, box games. He was the
illegally.
No. Actually, he was the official distributor for Quake in Latin America. So he was like a legit guy, legit business, and he was very interested in our website. And he said, "Hey, are you planning to do this as a business, or is this just going to be a hobby forever?" And actually, he's the one who really made me realize that this could be a company, this could be a startup. He actually became my first angel investor somehow, without knowing he was an angel investor. I just took money because I wanted to grow the company.
Yes.
And but he was super helpful. He introduced me to the game industry. He took me to E3 for the first time.
Oh.
He helped me get meetings with publishers and game companies. I was 18 at the time. And then I started traveling. I started traveling to all game shows, and I started going to Japan for the first time to Tokyo Game Show in '98.
98.
Yes.
Oh man, it was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
Okay.
And of course I was in love with the gaming industry because I always wanted to make games. And it didn't work out as I wanted, right? I wanted to make games, but at the time I think that I realized that the education system, at least in Mexico, it was not good enough to make games. And also the opportunities were not there because there were no studios whatsoever doing games in Mexico. So it was a hard path to get to make games. And then I realized that, I could just be sad and lament myself and be angry or upset about it, or I can keep working on this website that was growing like crazy.
Yeah.
That was my entry to the video game industry from a different perspective, right?
Latin America, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
in Latin America.
Yeah.
It was all for, I would say, Spanish-speaking audiences, right? So this was a great opportunity in the end because it opened the door for the industry. I started coming to Tokyo Game Show, to Japan a couple of times a year. I started meeting with a lot of great people from game companies and become good friends with them. And the company kept growing. We were a website, then it became a magazine, and then it became a media company. And at some point we had like 100 employees. I was maybe 22 by then. I met my co-founder along the way. I mean, multiple co-founders. One co-founder quit, and then the new one joined, and we started building the company. And as young founders, we did a lot of stupid things, of course. We did a lot of great things, of course. I guess we had a great experience. And I would say that, as any other entrepreneur, most of the times it's a lot of shit and a lot of bad things.
Yeah.
And then a few times some successes and some happy times, right? And we learned the hard way. We learned to build a company or build companies like that. But I was in love with the game industry, and that was my first company.
So what happened to it? Is it dead or is it exited? Or?
That company sort of exited. So I exited like 11 years in after that. I think I ran it for about 10, 11 years. It got mostly acquired by a group of game distributors and game publishers.
Okay.
And game retailers, actually. So also game shops. So they mostly acquired the website for me, and I was, of course, a little bit tired after 10, 11 years working there. The company kind of collapsed, but then the main thing, which was the website and the magazine for the games, remained. So even though we did a lot of stupid things, that proved to be the typical case where if the product is really good, and if the product really solves a very specific need or market need, it doesn't matter if you do like a lot of stupid things, the product remains. And people keep buying it or consuming it, and I think that was pretty interesting. But after that, I actually went to Japan for the first time to live there for a while, and I stayed there for about a year and a half, mostly doing kind of like business development for a game company, hiring Japanese studios to do games in Latin America. Pretty strange story.
Interesting.
And I did that for about a year. It was not like a super intensive kind of work, so I had a lot of time to think about what to do next.
And what do you do now?
So essentially, I had a small stint, maybe about 4 years, working in advertising.
Yes.
It was around the time that apps became a thing with the iPhone and the iPad and Android and so on.
It's crazy.
And everybody wanted to do that. I realized that a lot of brands and agencies wanted to do that. So we set up like a small agency and started doing a lot of app development and also like social media stuff. And it went actually pretty well. We worked with amazing companies, and I learned a lot from the marketing side of things and the advertising side of things, and also how companies define their strategies and how they work to push a message. even though you're doing the software side.
Yeah.
And eventually I got tired of that and I wanted to go back to software development somehow. And I think that was when we met, actually, because I went to, I sold that agency in 2013, and then I moved to Silicon Valley, and then eventually that company became the company that I met you with in Japan.
Oh, that's right.
So, yeah, the agency slash marketing thing, it was only for about 4 years. So then I put up together a group of friends, some Japanese friends, some Mexican friends. We went to Silicon Valley. We joined 500 Startups back in the day when Dave McClure was running it. And we did this company.
I know Dave very well.
Oh, yeah, me too. And I really still, appreciate him a lot. And he did a lot of really great things for us. In the end, it was a great experience. We always wanted to be in Silicon Valley and just try it, and have a shot and leave that and learn from the Valley as well. And we started a video and augmented reality company. That's when we eventually did some fundraising and we found some Japanese investors and we relocated from Mountain View to Tokyo. And I ran the company with my co-founders for about 5 years.
Nice.
We did a bunch of mobile products, a bunch of augmented reality products.
Name one.
One was called Unda. It was a video messaging app with an augmented reality module. We did one called Video Selfie, which I think the pitch is like what TikTok is doing right now. Doing small videos with music in the background. That was actually great, but we were riding that wave of early augmented reality like Snapchat, and then we were riding that wave of early micro videos like Vine and TikTok. So it was pretty interesting. It was a crazy time.
Yeah, TikTok is really going crazy.
Yeah, I know. We actually met the Musical.ly guys, which were super dominant in the States, and they invited us to go to Shanghai, and at some point they actually kind of wanted to do things together, but we couldn't never figure out a way to do it. But yeah, they eventually got acquired by TikTok and they became ByteDance, and the rest is history. They're a huge company now. But yeah, we were riding that wave the early days of AR, the early days of AR with Snapchat. We were doing some product that was similar, and then the early days of micro videos with music like TikTok. And eventually our most successful product was an app called Pocket Video.
Pocket Video.
Yeah.
Wait.
I think that you saw that pitch maybe in Tokyo. And that was kind of like, the pitch was, we built the most advanced and most useful set of tools for kids who wanted to become YouTube bloggers, who wanted to create their YouTube channels. And back then we realized that companies like Adobe, they didn't really have like a good set of tools for mobile creators.
Yes, that's right.
And we said, okay, let's do it. And basically they started to try to do something. We started competing with Adobe one-to-one. And I have to be very proud about that team and my team, because we kicked Adobe's ass. Our app had at some point like maybe 3-4 million users or 4 million downloads in total and about 2 million users. And Adobe's apps didn't even rank on the App Store. And ours was always on the top 100 in the photo
Congratulations.
in the photo and the photo and the video categories. And so we did good, but I think that we ran out of time. Investors either didn't really understand what was the vision for the product, or maybe we couldn't explain to investors what was the vision of the product. For us, we kept saying that having the tools to do YouTube on mobile was very powerful because many people don't have access to a PC or a more sophisticated machine. The phone is the only thing they have. So, it was too soon. I think Apple was still introducing the maybe 2 years before they introduced the subscription models. So it was so hard to monetize. It was very, very difficult to monetize. Kids didn't really want to spend that much money. Putting ads on the app break the experience. So we had to balance that out, and it was not enough money. So it was really tough. In the end, we had the users, and we beat Adobe to the punch. But sometimes it's not enough, right? We couldn't figure out how to make money out of it, and we had to shut down the company.
Okay, so what is your current company right now? You've done amazing things, but what is your current company?
So yeah, the new company, what we're doing right now, it's kind of like going back to my original passion of games. What we are doing is essentially a more traditional game company. We are developing games. We realize that this space of augmented reality is very interesting. It's a space where the technologies are moving very fast. Companies like Apple and Google and many others, Facebook, Snapchat, and so on, they're investing a lot of money to AR platforms and AR, SDKs and frameworks and so on, and giving us all the tools to build things on top of that. So we realize that, if you compare game development with augmented reality, there's a bunch of very common things, right? There's a lot of interaction design. There's a lot of interactive things. There's a lot of real-time 3D graphics. So we decided to create this kind of game company of the future in a way. And
game company of the future?
I think so.
Explain that.
I think that's kind of a way to say that a game company nowadays has to be flexible enough to develop for all these new technologies that are coming in. Many people talk about Pokemon Go, right? And they say, oh, Pokemon Go, it's the first augmented reality game that is successful worldwide. Well, I always say that is not true. I mean, essentially, Pokemon Go, 98% of the time, you don't use augmented reality. I think augmented reality for Pokemon Go was just a gimmick, kind of a small experience that you actually can turn on or off and essentially just use it for a very short period of time. I think that the real breakthrough in terms of augmented reality and augmented reality entertainment, we haven't seen that yet.
Interesting.
My feeling is that there's a few companies that are trying to do it now in a deeper way. For example, Microsoft is now about to launch Minecraft for augmented reality. That's actually, I think, going to be a very good experiment to see how the game performs and how people behave around that. But I think that the keys to augmented reality and game development, and when you combine those, we're still a little bit away from the technologies that are necessary to create real augmented reality games.
Okay. So you are in the game development of the future for the game development, but you are targeting that.
Exactly.
Okay.
We're targeting that, but the thing is, still a long way to go, I think, and there's still some things to happen.
Tools are not available, or tools are available, but everyone doesn't know how to use it.
I think it's more about a lot of tools that still need to be more developed. There are problems like persistence, and there are problems like I would say that maybe persistence is perhaps the most important one, and also multiplayer. So for example, having a session together with a large group of people, that it's the same world that you can see in augmented reality, things like that. Okay. I think that there are a bunch of startups that are starting to try to solve those problems, but it's still early on. So that's our vision. We think that there's a bunch of really interesting things that are going to happen in augmented reality, but we're already making some augmented reality things that are available right now. Our focus in the company is to do mini augmented reality games.
Mini augmented reality games.
Yes, that's what pays the bills. We want to be specialized in doing quick games that are 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 1 minute long. Usually what we're doing is focusing on the social platforms. So these games run inside the lenses, the augmented reality lenses of Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. So when you open the camera, I think typically people, what they do is they just put some mask, right, on their face and take a selfie. What we are trying to do now is make the user switch to the back camera, and then play a small game.
Okay.
And it's only 30 seconds long or 45 seconds long.
Individually log the users through 30 seconds games, or you get every user to do it?
I mean, essentially, it's like using an AR filter. It's the same experience. You open the camera and you open the filter, but instead of putting just a mask in your face, if you switch to the back camera, you have a small mini game, and you can play that mini game for 30 seconds or 35 seconds. And you can share it. You can record it on video, or you can take a photo and then post it on your stories, or maybe you can post it on your Facebook feed or your Instagram stories. But it's a quick game. It's like a small quick game in augmented reality. So we're using tools that are out there. It's nothing super breakthrough, but we are specializing in doing those quick augmented reality games. And of course, we see a lot of really interesting things in that space. What's going to happen in a few years when those platforms become a little bit more sophisticated, when you can do multiplayer, when there's real world persistence with those experiences, even when you can integrate those to other experiences, for example, playing a game and then doing an augmented reality ad, some stuff like that.
Nice.
So I think that, we have a very clear vision where this is going, and we have really ambitious plans, but we have to start with the low-hanging fruit. And the low-hanging fruit is we are a game developer. We are actually making a console title as well. This is
console title.
Yes.
Interesting.
Like a real game, like a real actual console title. This is good for us because it helps us flex our muscles. It helps us, keep getting better at making games. It's also a good showcase that we can show to companies and say, hey, look, this is a real actual game, and this is a very sophisticated, very complex console game. Like every other console game, they're more complex. So do you think that we can make a 30, 45 second augmented reality game?
Yeah.
I think we can.
Yeah.
So the way to sell it is like that, right? Like we are actual game developers. My co-founder, I was telling you, it's one of the guys who did these kind of geeky but kind of famous game, super famous game called Kerbal Space Program.
Yeah.
So he's one of the early members over there,
and you get NASA, right?
I mean, not me, but that game became kind of famous, and then NASA endorsed it for a long time. Not as an official game, but more like hey, you guys need to check out this super cool game about space, and it's super amazing. That game was actually made in Mexico. This is a fun fact that maybe not so many people know, but it was made in Mexico City. And we tried to put together some of the original members of that team. They got acquired, by the way, by a super big game company called Take-Two.
Take-Two.
You know that company, right? So they got acquired by Take-Two, and after they got acquired, the original team kind of left. And we tried to put together that team back in Mexico City. And the vision is make games for those future augmented reality platforms, start with the low-hanging fruit augmented reality things, and make really, really cool games so we can also showcase what we can do.
Interesting. But your mobile games, right?
No, mostly, I mean, on the how to define it. Okay, so it's two sides. One is the games that are owned by us, our own titles. Those we are very interested about consoles and PC. Okay. And then the ones that we do for the outside, right? The ones that we are doing for other companies or those experiences, those are on mobile, because essentially most of the augmented reality platforms run on mobile. Okay. So those are in mobile. Maybe that's the best way to explain it. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I support you, and
thank you.
Yes. But what are you doing in Korea?
Yeah, we're trying to open the door with Korean game companies. We feel that there's a bunch of opportunities that Korean game companies, I don't think that they have realized about yet.
Yeah. Latin America?
Like Latin America, for example. You know, in terms of Latin America, I think that there's a huge opportunity for some of their games. That's kind of a different thing that we are trying to do.
Okay.
As I said, we're kind of waiting for the time is right for many things. But in the meantime, we operate, I think, like a very typical game company, right? We do game development, we do B2B or sort of work for hire for other companies. But we are also actually are experimenting a little bit with publishing.
Okay.
And publishing actually is pretty interesting because we know a lot about our market. We know a lot about online distribution and game user acquisition. We are a very experienced team in game development and all these areas that are required to do mobile operations, mobile game operations.
Okay.
So we realized that another way of trying to add value, you know, being in that region is to work with bigger game companies and try to make them realize, especially in Korea, for example, that the Latin American market is actually pretty big and that they need to wake up and do something about it. And we want to help them.
Interesting. Final question.
Yes.
What do you think the world is the most impactful thing you can do?
What is the most impactful thing that I can do for the world?
Yeah.
I see. That's a tricky question. You know, sometimes...
It's the last question.
Okay. I mean, to be honest, like lately, I've always been like a really big fan of, you know, the universe and our place in the universe and trying to understand, you know, the theories, you know, behind many of these super grand scale things, right?
Yeah. It's all you.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting for me, you know, in the end, I feel that many of the things that we do, right, as humans and as humanity, I think that they're not going to have a huge impact in the grand scale of things. I think that there's only a handful of people that maybe will be able to have like a real impact in terms of humanity doing something bigger. And I think it's good to know like who you are, right? Like what can you do? And it's good to know what can you do, what are your limitations, what are your capacities. And, you know, I'm not Elon Musk, I know that. And I know that I'm not that kind of, you know, person in many different ways. So for me, I think that what I realized is that games bring a lot of joy and a lot of happiness. And, you know, this is quite interesting for me because I feel that, you know, in the grand scale of things, we only live as a tiny, tiny bit of time, right?
Yeah.
And, well, at least if I can contribute, you know, in that tiny bit that my existence in this world was, and if I can do something that can make people happy and they can play our games or our AR experiences, I think that that's a good thing to do, right? I mean, people can enjoy maybe a few minutes of their day, or maybe they can enjoy for 30 minutes of their day or their week. And if they're happy, I think that that was a good contribution. Maybe it's not super impactful in the grand scale of things, but at least, you know, we're trying to make people happy with our creations. We're putting a lot of passion and a lot of love into what we do. And I think you can tell when you see our games and our products. I think that that's a good thing to maybe be aware of.
Definitely. I thank you. And it's the end of the interview, and I thank you. And it was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate the time. And
I thank you, and good luck in your endeavors.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the time. And as always, I'm very happy to see you, Richard. It's always super good to meet with you.
Yes.
You're always an inspiration. You're always someone that I really admire. So thanks for having the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.